The Declaration of Independence is only 1,458 words. It can be read aloud in just a few minutes, but its meaning is not always clear. Its history is often debated, and its central claim that all men are created equal is still a subject of ongoing controversy. This year, as we get ready for a unique moment in our long and explosion-filled history of celebrating Independence Day, we are going to do something a little different. Instead of focusing on the familiar words of the Declaration itself, we're going to dig a little deeper into the question of the relationship between the Declaration and the U.S. Constitution. Stay with us as we look at this question, which may give us a new take on the meaning of the 4th of July. So, should these documents be read together, or do they serve different purposes?
This is a surprisingly difficult question to answer, even though the physical documents are usually kept close together, never to be separated like twins or the 4th of July and cheeseburgers.
The physical documents are practically inseparable. In August 1814, the Declaration and Constitution were saved from destruction by State Department clerks, who moved them to the basement of a Georgian brick house in Leesburg, Virginia. During World War II, the two documents were rushed onto a Pullman car and accompanied by heavily armed government agents and shipped to Fort Knox for safekeeping. Since 1952, the two documents have made their home in the National Archives, protected by the most advanced security systems in the world. While physically the documents seem inseparable and written only 11 years apart, does that mean they serve the same purpose?
Several scholars say no.
Some scholars argue that they serve different purposes, and some even argue that the Constitution was written to undo some of the more idealistic principles of the Revolutionary Declaration.
Is the Constitution a fulfillment of the ideals of the Declaration? Or does the Constitution undo those ideals by placing checks on liberty and compromising with slavery? Let's start with the first view, that the Constitution and Declaration are at odds with each other.
Anti-Federalists, those who opposed the adoption of the Constitution, were the first to make this case. In 1787, as the Constitution was being debated, many Anti-Federalists believed that the Constitution was a dangerous turn away from their vision of a new nation as an aggregation of free and independent states. A few even worried that the new Constitution, which favored a large republic and a stronger central government, would threaten the rights-based limited government vision of the Declaration. According to this view, the Declaration was a statement of small and limited government. For the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to be secure, the government had to be close to the people and limited in size and power. In their view, the Constitution was a dangerous deviation from these principles. There are a number of variants of what is sometimes called the rejectionist position. In the 1860s, Southern leaders, including Alexander Stephens, argued that the Declaration was being used to undermine the Union. Stephens once argued in his notorious and widely condemned Cornerstone speech, the Declaration of Independence was erroneous. The foundation of the new government in the South was based on the principle that all men are not equal. Stephens insisted a new peace could only be secured if we abandoned the Declaration as a founding document and as a guide for a revised post-war constitution. This was not an uncommon view in the South during the Civil War era. Abraham Lincoln's political rival, Stephen A. Douglas, argued that popular sovereignty, not human equality, was the most important guiding principle in the Declaration of Independence. John C. Calhoun argued that the idea of universal human equality began and ended in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. Everyone else is born into various modes of superiority and subjugation. Therefore, the Declaration of Independence could only be viewed as a mistake. Calhoun called it a poisonous fruit that would result in the destruction of the Union.
The rejectionist view is accepted by some scholars today, but for quite different reasons.
Some follow the progressive historian Charles Beard, who argued that the Constitution itself is flawed. For Beard and historians who follow in his footsteps, the framers of the U.S. Constitution had betrayed the principles of the Declaration of Independence. The 1787 founding is to be viewed as an oligarchic coup, which toppled the mighty ideals of equality at the heart of our most important national document. Finally, a large and influential group of legal scholars and historians argue that, while the Declaration is not unimportant, it simply has no authority in constitutional law. While the Declaration is not antithetical to the Constitution, they argue that it has little practical value in deciding important cases that wind up in the Supreme Court.
Now let's explore the other side.
Those who view the two documents as inseparable make strong claims worth exploring. First, they point out that the country did not begin in 1787. Rather, the nation grew from a collection of seedling colonies through a series of evolutionary stages, the most critical stage of the nation's existence being the Declaration of Independence. It expressed the revolutionary self-evident principle that all men are created equal and that all people, regardless of race, class, or any other secondary characteristic, have basic rights that cannot be taken away. The Constitution enjoys its authority today because of the existence of the Declaration, and the Declaration only. With this in mind, the American government obtains its power to make decisions and protect rights from the people only on the foundational principle of consent. The Constitution is amendable because of the argument stated in the Declaration that no government is absolute. If the government does not protect the rights of the people have a right to alter or abolish the government.
Constitutional scholar Randy Barnett phrases it succinctly. The U.S. Constitution is best understood as the means to the ends of the political theory found in the 1776 Declaration of Independence. The Declaration is primary because it correctly identifies the political theory on which the United States was founded.
Yet another group of scholars find a compromise between the two views. Neither document, they argue, is primary. Instead, they are mutually reinforcing.
In the words of Dr. William B. Allen, they are necessary and reciprocal supports.
This perspective, which is sometimes called the fusionist view, can be traced back to the abolitionist movement in the 1840s and 50s. One of the most important defenders of this view was the African-American abolitionist, orator, and social reformer Frederick Douglass. In one of his greatest speeches, The Meaning of the 4th of July, Douglass said that the Declaration was the ring bolt to the chain of the nation's destiny. The principles of the Declaration were saving principles and the only guidance through the approaching conflict. In an unforgettable passage, Douglass enjoined his audience to cling to the principles of 1776 like a storm-tossed mariner. Abraham Lincoln agreed with Douglass and would become the most famous exponent of the idea that the two documents are mutually reinforcing reciprocal supports. During the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln defended his long-standing view that the Union is much older than the Constitution. To illustrate, have you ever wondered why Lincoln marked the occasion with the phrase 7 years ago?
A score is equal to 20 years, and so when Lincoln says that 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, Lincoln is referencing a point 87 years in the past.
The Gettysburg Address was delivered on November 19, 1863. 1863 minus 87 is 1776, the year of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. By tracing nationhood to the Declaration, Lincoln was aiming at two intertwined goals. First was his intent to weaken the South's justification for secession. Second was his moral argument that reached to the heart of the meaning of the American founding. By tracing nationhood back to 1776, Lincoln strengthened the majority view that the U.S. Constitution was fundamentally at odds with slavery. While both Lincoln and Frederick Douglass acknowledged that slavery had been contemplated in the political act of writing a constitution, both men disagreed with those, like William Lloyd Garrison, that the U.S. Constitution was a pro-slavery instrument. In Garrison's words, a covenant with death and an agreement with hell.
Countering that view, both Lincoln and Frederick Douglass pointed out that a historically informed view of the U.S. Constitution would take into account both the ways in which the Constitution had failed to live up to the ideals of 1776 and in the ways which it had succeeded. In Douglass's words, if the South has made the Constitution bend to the purposes of slavery, let the North now make that instrument bend to the cause of freedom and justice.
As we approach the 4th of July this year, and in the spirit of the abolitionist Frederick Douglass, perhaps we can learn to think more about the ways in which the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution inform and support each other, often in surprising but important ways.
What do you think? Which of these positions is most persuasive to you? Let us know what you think in the comments below.
Before we end, we want to answer one of our most frequently asked questions. Every few years, an old draft or copy of the first official printing of the Declaration seems to pop up somewhere. In 2018, a Declaration broadside was found and sold at auction for $1.2 million. Are there still copies floating around, and could a copy be in your grandparents' attic? The answer is yes. And to find out, we recommend giving Grandma or Grandpa a call to say hi and to see if you can help give it a clean. With that recommendation out of the way, thanks for watching. And if you are interested in finding out more, take a look at our curated reading list in the description. We wish you a happy 4th of July.